All right, chapter 27. Uh-oh, May said, backing away from the mirror. That pretty much covers it, Jack agreed, yanking her back more quickly. Whatever was pouring out of the mirror looked like some kind of bright greenish-yellow smoke, though Jack hadn't ever seen smoke that glowed. "This way," the prince yelled, then gestured for Jack and May to get outside. Jack couldn't really argue with that, so he pushed May toward the door, then ran to the bed. There was no way the wolf could move on his own. Jack put his shoulder under one of the animal's injured legs and heaved. Only he didn't move the animal an inch. "Whoa," Jack said. "He must weigh like 100 stone. "You," the woman in blue said, pointing at Jack. "Out. I'll take care of this creature." Jack started to object, then looked into the woman's eyes that were completely white. The woman, whoever she was, had no irises or pupils whatsoever. "Right," Jack said, knowing better than to argue with the woman with no eyes. He lowered the wolf's leg back onto the bed, then ran for the door, leaping over a small cloud of whatever was coming out of the mirror. It might have been his imagination, but the cloud almost looked like it grabbed for him as he jumped. Philip caught him on the other side and pulled him out the door, which slammed shut behind him. May was waiting a short distance away at entrance of the clearing, so the two joined her there. "Who was that woman?" Jack asked the prince when they'd gotten a relatively comfortable distance away. "We call her Merryweather," Philip said, watching the cottage, "though I do not know if that is her real name." "She's not human, is she?" Jack said. "No," the prince said. "She is a queen of the fairy folk. My father saved her life when I was very young, and she has watched over me ever since. She called herself my grandmother, actually, when I was young." He frowned. "I wonder what the delay is." "I am here," said the fairy queen from directly behind him. All three spun around to find her standing calmly with the wolf king lying in the grass at her feet. The wolf was breathing hard, but it wasn't as labored as it has been. And he wasn't bleeding. In fact, his fur had grown back, and he seemed to be completely healed. Jack's eyes went wide. "That's amazing," he said breathlessly. The right side of Merryweather's mouth turned up the slightest bit. "Hardly," she said, "and I'd rather see the animal dead. Still, I did as my young prince requested. The animal will be fine when it wakes." She bent down and picked up the wolf's chin, then let it drop back to the ground. The wolf never moved. "After healing the creature," she said, "I enchanted it to sleep so that I'd have time to change your minds." She gave them all a hard look. "No good will come from this one, children. Its life has been one of hardship and lost love, and I do not know if it is capable of returning from such a dark place." Jack didn't have any idea what to say to that, but before he could think of anything, Philip grabbed his arm, spun him around, and pointed at the clearing. On Jack's other side, May gasped. As much as he knew he'd regret doing it, Jack reluctantly followed their gazes back to the cottage. The greenish-yellow smoke was now visible through the windows, filling the entire cottage. Cracks appeared in the brick walls, and the wood in the roof began to crack, shrieking as if in pain. The smoke continued to spread, the creaking growing louder and louder until finally the entire roof launched into the air like a lid exploding off a pot of boiling water. The roof spun as it shot into the air, rising in an arc that suddenly looked like it might land a bit too close to them for comfort. As the roof tumbled back down, heading straight for their group, Jack, May, and Philip all jumped backwards. Merryweather, however, didn't move. The roof crashed down a few inches from her foot, and the fairy queen didn't so much as flinch. Instead, she glanced down at it, then looked back up at the smoke and frowned. "Your Highness," she said to Philip, "you are not safe here." "She's quick, huh?" May whispered to Jack. "What is it?" Philip asked the fairy queen. As they spoke, the smoke seemed to be coalescing into some sort of shape, almost like a body, a torso. Merryweather never took her eyes off the smoke as the sheer magnitude of it began to block out the sunlight. "It is a devil, plain and true," she said. "My people call it the jinn, but I believe humans refer to them as genies." She narrowed her eyes. "This one is known to me. It is an ifrit, one of the elders." "You two have met?" May asked. The fairy queen sighed. "I know the one who trapped it in the mirror," she said. "Her folly invites ruin upon us all." "An ifrit," Jack said. "Is that more powerful than any other genies?" The fairy queen turned her white eyes on him, making him regret asking. "You might say that," she said. "The younger genies are close to being all-powerful, but are forced by their elders to learn humility through services to lesser beings, usually humans." "How nice," May sniffed. "It's good to know where we stand in the grand scheme of things." "Indeed," Merryweather said. "The elders, the ifrits, are even more powerful than their young, and controlling them is next to impossible once they are let loose. Fortunately for our world, there have only been 2 who made their way here during my lifetime. This is the second." And the first? Jack asked, watching as the genie's torso filled in completely, the smoke now building arms the size of storm clouds. At the very top, almost too high to see, it looked as if a head might be forming. The first, Meriwether said, with the barest hint of a smile. It's best that you not know, human. Your kind tends to react badly to their world almost being unmade. Fortunately, one of my fellow fairy queens tricked it into trapping itself within a kerosene lamp, then hid the lamp where no one will ever discover it. Bet someone finds it, May whispered to Jack. Meriwether turned her gaze to the princess, her white eyes blazing in anger. Before May could say anything, though, Meriwether took a step back in surprise. You, the fairy queen shouted, her eyes wide. May froze for a second, clearly just as surprised as the fairy queen. Me? She asked in a small voice. Jack inched between the two, not trusting this eyeless fairy queen at all. You, Meriwether repeated, still in shock. I know you. You were not where you were meant to be. I arrived at the appointed time and you were not there. What? May said. Suddenly the fairy in May's hair sat up and waved her hands. Meriwether glanced at her. Little sister, the fairy queen said in greeting, and the fairy in May's hair began gesturing around, first at Jack, then at May, and back again. Somehow Jack thought he heard her saying words something about a charmed one, but it must have been his imagination. Then they all jumped as one of the ifrit's expanding arms knocked a tree over on the other side of the clearing. Can we talk about this later, whatever it is, May said quickly? 'Cause, I'd rather not get crushed by Mr. Smoky Pants here. Meriwether shook her head at May. You do not act like a princess should, she said, raising an eyebrow. Clearly your manners have suffered from our missed appointment. Still, there are more important matters to attend to now. If left unchecked, the ifrit will surely destroy us all, if not this entire world. Meriwether, Philip said softly. He gently took her shoulder and turned her back toward the genie, where eyes the size of small lakes stared down at them, each delving into a shade of black that Jack wouldn't have believed actually existed if he weren't staring at it. It was like he could feel the genie's eyes pulling at him, pulling at his very soul. The face around the eyes resembled some kind of horned mask more than anything else, a mask that covered the front of the smoke's head, while the rest of the head seemed to swirl around on its own. It reminded Jack uncomfortably of the witch with the broken eggshell for a face. I shouldn't have put the crown in, should I, May said. It wasn't a question. Meriwether, Philip repeated, taking a few steps back. I know that this creature is powerful, but are you able to fight it? The perfect prince sounded nervous, and Jack wished they weren't all about to die, so he could have enjoyed it more. Meriwether looked at Philip and sighed. I am sorry, Philip. You promised to release me from my service if I healed this creature, she said, pointing at the slumbering wolf. And my debt to your father is paid. Still, the fairy queen said, glancing at May, I do owe this one. If she wishes it, I could try to defeat the ifrit, but that would then fulfill any responsibility I have to you as well, princess. Philip glanced at May, looking for some kind of answer, despite it being clear that the prince had no idea what was going on. May didn't seem to be following any better, and jumped as if she was surprised to be called on. Oh, right, she said quickly. Yeah, go ahead and save us, that's great. You don't need to help me anymore. Saving our lives from the genie is enough, so thank you? Meriwether smiled. You obviously have no knowledge of what was meant for you, child. Someday perhaps I shall tell you. However, if this is your wish, I shall grant it. Now, you three must flee while you can. I will make sure you have the chance. Philip nodded, then pulled the other two back toward the wolf. All three grabbed the animal's legs, and together they managed to pull him back a few feet into the dubious safety of the woods, as Meriwether boldly strode forward to stand on the fallen roof. Ifrit, her voice rang out, startling Jack with its force. One of my kind imprisoned you long ago, and now I am here to send you back where you came from. Face me, coward. And with that she grew. Her form grew slightly transparent as if she were also made of smoke, and she spread out more and more until she was the same size as the ifrit. Then she solidified back into her normal opaque body. For its part, the ifrit didn't seem to care about Meriwether's taunt. Little fairy, it said to her in a completely monotone yet booming voice, you do not know what you are attempting to do. Oh, I do, Meriwether said. I realize that you may destroy me, and if that is my fate, I welcome it. Come now, let us see if the vaunted reputation of the jinn is well deserved. Oh, what have I done? Philip said, fear filling his eyes as he looked at Jack and May. I thought she could. Jack grabbed his shoulder and shook him, trying to either comfort the prince or shake some coherence back into him. She's probably bluffing, Jack said. She wouldn't just throw her life away no matter what she thought she owed May. What would be the point? Philip shrugged off Jack's hand and took a step toward the cottage. I do not care. I will not allow her to die for us. No one will die if I can help it. Jack jerked him back toward the woods. That brings up an interesting question, Philip. Namely, how are you supposed to help? You're not going to do much good by standing there really still, are you? Philip struggled against Jack's grip, but Jack locked his arms around the prince's. We have to do something, Philip cried. Jack nodded. That's right, he said, grunting at the effort it took to keep the prince from running off. Whatever else he might be, Philip was strong. We have to run to get away, Jack continued. If not, Merryweather might be sacrificing herself for nothing. We have to get out of here, and now. Philip, tell him, May. When the princess didn't answer, Jack abruptly released Philip, who fell forward in surprise. May? Jack asked in a small voice. He looked all around the forest path, but the princess was gone. There, Philip shouted from the ground, pointing out toward the clearing. Jack glanced up to see Maeve running as hard as she could, heading straight for the remains of the Red Hood's cottage. A cottage that was going to be the center of the battle between a genie and Philip's fairy godmother. Goodness gracious. May's always getting herself into trouble. We'll have to see what happens next.